Things are looking rough. After fighting Mike Tyson last year in a massive spectacle, it seemed like Jake Paul had some momentum coming into 2025, but has since lost some big opportunities and seems to be getting desperate. So this is the harsh reality of Jake Paul and his next fight.
So Jake Paul has recently just called out Anthony Joshua to a fight.
I want to fight Anthony Joshua exclusive because I know that I will fucking beat Anthony Joshua's ass. I know
he
I
just
will
got
beat.
knocked out, right?
Yeah. He doesn't have a chin and he has no skill and he's stiff. And I love you, Anthony. We're friends. All this shit, but I want to fight you.
So how did we get here? How did Jake Paul go from wanting to fight Canelo Alavarez to wanting to fight Gervonta Tank Davis? Now he wants to fight Anthony Joshua. It seems like he's really desperate for a big name opponent, and that's really the problem with his next fight. He's kind of relying on trying to find someone in the world of boxing that has a huge name, that will bring a lot to the table, that will have a lot of value, like when he fought Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is one of the biggest names in combat sports history, a household name. Generations of people know Mike Tyson. Obviously, that was a way past his prime Mike Tyson, and Jake really didn't get respect for that fight because of the version of Mike Tyson he was fighting, an old 58-year-old Mike who, if he was in his prime, would obviously handle Jake Paul with ease. For years, he's been saying he has world champions aspirations. He wants to get a world title in boxing, but he's not been climbing the ranks. Instead, he's been having these massive spectacle fights, which, I mean, if he fights AJ, respect for getting in the ring with a monster like that, a massive heavyweight with knockout power who's not too far off his prime, but we pretty much know what that is. Jake Paul signing up to take a beating but cash out, get a huge check, get a huge payday, get a huge event. So now it's back to the drawing board, and he's been trying to secure some big fights, but time and time again, he's kind of just been getting done pretty badly by the likes of Turkey Sheik, who, when Jake Paul was trying to negotiate a fight between him and Canelo, Turkey kind of just played Jake and took that from him. Calls Jake Paul not a real boxer, says that Canelo only fights real boxers. Now Turkey Sheik is signing with Dana White, and they're making a boxing promotion. Obviously, Jake Paul doesn't have a great relationship with either guy, and especially Dana White. They've had a rivalry for years, at least on Jake's side. So Jake has kind of been crashing out. Now there's reports that Turkey and Dana's promotion is going to be on Netflix, and they're going to put on the likes of Terrence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez. Potentially they want to put on a fight like Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury, which Jake Paul was so far the only person in the boxing world which had a Netflix deal, and he was kind of using that as leverage, as being the face of boxing or one of the biggest names, even though that's because he was fighting Mike Tyson. It's because he had such a great dance partner. And now that these guys look like they're getting into Netflix and could potentially be doing the same thing as him, but even bigger, Jake seems to be kind of crashing out now, saying, oh, I did everything first, I led the trail, everyone wants to copy me. It's just been a tough 2025 so far for Jake Paul in all aspects.
Yeah, you can tell this is really starting to affect Jake. Him going online, tweeting about these different situations, starting with the Canelo fight, him getting stolen out of that, which would have been insanely big for him to get a fight against Canelo, and fighting someone that actually has been kind of one of the faces of boxing for so many years now of this generation, Canelo Alvarez. Regardless if he lost any of those fights, which he obviously would have, it still would have just helped him and boosted him regardless. And you see him go from Canelo Alvarez, and then he has next this Tank Davis fight, which was reported that they were 100% in negotiations. Jake Paul was ringside for Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach, and even Gervonta in the post-fight press conference was hinting that Jake Paul was going to be next because some reporters brought it up. So this is just loss after loss for Jake Paul here. He was typically known for being the guy that came from YouTube to be able to get large names, big fights, and now this is kind of the first time throughout his journey where he's just left without anything substantial really. And it's gotten so bad to the point now, very recently, he's calling out Anthony Joshua to fight him next. Anthony Joshua is a big heavyweight. Yes, he just lost his last fight to Daniel Dubois, but for him to even try to get this, to negotiate this, you could tell he's kind of at his last options here. Jake Paul would get absolutely smoked by Anthony Joshua. Joshua is way bigger, way more powerful, way more skillful. Every attribute you could possibly give would be in Joshua's favor. And you gotta think why Jake even wants to take this fight. Sure, it would be a big fight, and at this point, I just don't even know if he cares anymore about losing. At this point, it seems like he's just desperate for a big fight regardless of the outcome, regardless of what happens, ever since his two big fights in Canelo and Tank got stolen from him. And on the other hand, you still have the number one option, it seemed, for all these years in KSI. That KSI fight has been wanted by so many people for so long now. But at this point, it's kind of a question why he doesn't want that fight. It's his biggest fight in the moment, his most winnable fight in the moment compared to all these other guys. It would still be huge, and he would be able to move on from there if he's able to beat KSI to then get again some of the more bigger guys in boxing when the opportunity calls for it. So it's not like he has completely zero options, but it's got to be rough for Jake at this point still.
Yeah, for a fight like Canelo or an Anthony Joshua, where obviously everyone knows he's gonna lose, at least then he would at least get some kind of respect for fighting them. It's not like he would probably go in there thinking he's gonna win or knock them out. Like, he's gotta know the levels, but I guess it's the fact that it's who he's losing to, not how he's losing, I guess, because if you lose to Canelo, I mean, that's one of the greatest pound-for-pound boxers in the world. If you lose to AJ, that's a former heavyweight world champion and is way bigger and is way stronger and has been doing this for way longer, and AJ would obviously destroy him. Olympic gold medalist. It's not like he's just some big guy who's just entered boxing. Like, at least call out someone like a Francis Ngannou who doesn't have the years on years of pure boxing experience. Even then, Francis is way bigger, way more powerful, and probably would handle Jake Paul with ease just purely based off of size alone, as well as the fact that, I mean, he put up a decent fight against Tyson Fury himself, even though Francis did get knocked out by AJ a couple months later. But at least it's a relatively more winnable fight, I guess, for Jake Paul. It's not even like AJ's way past his prime. He's 35 years old, is just coming off a loss to Dubois, but literally last year was on a 3-fight win streak, knocking out the likes of Francis Ngannou, Otto Wallin, Robert Helenius. But it seems like these guys are somehow in negotiations for a fight in 2026. Both guys have now teased it on their social media pages. If he did fight Anthony Joshua, that's gonna be the fight where everyone goes, wow, Jake Paul's finally gonna get knocked out. Jake Paul's finally gonna get shut out. He's finally gonna get humbled, and people would tune in. You can't act like people wouldn't care about that fight, because they definitely would. And I mean, if Jake did actually get in the ring with AJ, I gotta respect it. I gotta give him his credit. He's getting in the ring with a former heavyweight champion who's really not way past his prime and would probably put the beats on Jake brutally and badly. He did lose to Tommy Fury, so even though that was a couple years ago now, that's also another potential option. I'm pretty sure Tommy Fury is, though, signed to Misfits Boxing, so they'd have to work out a deal there. There's also Darren Till out there, KSI. But if, for example, he lost to someone like Canelo or AJ, it wouldn't really be that detrimental to his career compared to losing to these other guys like a KSI, like a Tommy Fury, because that would really shut down everything he's got going on. He's expected to lose to Anthony Joshua brutally at that. He's expected to get knocked out, demolished, embarrassed. So he has options out there, but if you're talking about a big Netflix fight specifically, because guys like Tommy Fury, KSI, Darren Till seem to be signed under DAZN and Misfits, so a guy like Canelo or Tank who are with Al Heyman and PBC could be possible, as well as them just being the faces of boxing in general. Canelo, Tank, AJ, these are the biggest possible names in the sport, the highest paid guys, and Jake is trying to fight one of them because he wants to be up there. He wants to be in those conversations. He wants to be one of those faces of boxing, those biggest name boxers, most paid, highest paid, but they're just not winnable fights for Jake. They're not really realistic fights for Jake. For years, there were these negotiations between him and a guy like KSI, who, to be honest, were on a similar level, both big names. Jake Paul obviously has a little bit more credibility in the boxing world just because he's been fighting actively, he's been consistent, he's been calling out big names, he's been making headlines for so many years. So in terms of the combat sports audience, Jake Paul is definitely the bigger name between him and KSI, but they're both big YouTubers who've been boxing for a while, who've been training for a similar amount of time. But Jake has been talking like he's been so above this fight, and now it seems like that's really one of his main options, because who's he gonna fight now? I mean, AJ, that would just not go well for him at all, unless he just wants to go back to this traditional boxing route, which he was trying to do when he fought those journeymen like Ryan Borland and Andre August. No one really tuned in or really cared about those fights because there was no intrigue of him maybe losing or having an exciting build-up or whatever. And it seems like with him now being on with Netflix, he just wants that massive fight, and it's looking few and far between in terms of options. Canelo not there, Tank not there. He's going to be rematching Lamont Roach. AJ, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Jake Paul's issues too is also just because of a lack of respect for him in the boxing world. We've seen with Turki Al-Sheikh, he wants nothing to do with Jake Paul, calling him a gimmick. When on the other end, we've seen Turki Al-Sheikh have a connection now, have pictures, meet up with KSI, which is also technically like an influencer. And if anything, Jake Paul, like you said, is more credible in the boxing world than KSI is, and he's had more credible fights there. So it's just also a lot of burnt bridges there. Jake Paul doesn't get the respect from any of the top fighters, obviously, too. Canelo deciding not to go with him, kind of playing him just to get a better deal, more money from Turkey. Tank Davis, on the other hand, seemed like he was actually going to do it, but when it came to him nearly losing to Lamont Roach, obviously he's going to decide to have a rematch, go for his legacy, then just fight Jake Paul for a quick bag when he can still get a lot of money from these other fights. Jake Paul has definitely done a very good job in getting a lot of attention and a lot of headlines, a lot of news. So for once, it definitely seems like Jake is at a crossroads here. He's been hinting at announcements for a long time now. We're still yet to see anything. The latest announcement that people thought might have been a fight was him just announcing Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor 3, and as well Alicia Ben Gardner signing for MVP. Other than that, we've really not heard anything regarding when he's going to be fighting anytime soon. So you gotta wonder if they have anything even planned right now, considering that their main plans have failed and just didn't work out. So it might still be a while before we see any substantial news on when Jake Paul is going to be fighting next, and it might just end up being not as big of a name as he once expected it to be. But let us know down below who you think Jake Paul will be fighting next, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check the video on the screen on why Dana White will change boxing forever.